Very good afternoon to you all. I wanted to welcome every one of you, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends. You're most welcome to this side event. On behalf of the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IATI, it is my absolute pleasure to warmly welcome you to this dialogue on revitalizing development effectiveness at ECOSOC Forum on financing for development. I would like to extend our sincere thanks to the government of Nigeria for co-hosting this side event. Today, we are bringing together representatives from across the development effectiveness architecture. I'm sure you're recognizing them. The Development Cooperation Forum, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, the OECD Development Assistance Committee, the International Forum for TOSSD, and IATI. Why? Because our global frameworks and entities are referenced under the Chapter C of the Sevilla Commitment. It calls for revitalization of the development effectiveness agenda and recognizes all of us present here in that document. Agreed at the fourth Forum for International Conference in Financing for Development last year, the Sevilla Commitment made it clear that development cooperation is not delivering as effectively as it should. Fragmentation is increasing, reporting burdens are increasing, impact is not keeping up pace with needs, and crucially, it calls us to work together and address this. We are guided by the core principles of effectiveness of development cooperation stated in the Sevilla Commitment, country ownership and leadership, just to remind all of us, supported by strong policy coherence and focus on results, inclusive partnerships, transparency and accountability. Each of us here present today have an important role and strengths to bring it to the table. We generate, share data on development cooperation. We convene dialogues at global and national level. We support capacity building and represent a wide range of stakeholders across the development system. Our work is complementary, as you could see, but there is also areas of overlap. Unless we together align our efforts, we risk burdening the system than enhancing it. This Sevilla Commitment has renewed political momentum to the development effectiveness agenda. It states that it needs to be revitalized. Representatives has worked very, very hard to get us in that document. Today is the moment for getting us in action, more urgent than ever. Let me briefly walk you through the agenda and introduce our distinguished speakers, which I would leave later on for the panel moderator to do. It is my distinguished honor to be joined by Mr. Naveed Hanif, Assistant Secretary General at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, who will deliver our opening remark for this side event. Sir, we're very grateful. We will then hear from Mr. Asori Henry. I'm sure you all know him. Very familiar face from Minister of Budget and National Planning of the Government of Nigeria, who will share country perspective to us. And then we will have a panel discussion moderated by Your Excellency Grace Lewis-Wood, Acting Ambassador to the ECOSOC and Social Council at the UK Mission in the United Nations. And she will be joined by distinguished leaders in this panel, and she will introduce them later. I'll leave that to her. And then we will have, hopefully, a moment for discussion that we will exchange views. And later, in the end, we will have a closing remark from Mrs. Elia Warminger, from Deputy Head of Department of International Development at the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. That's the plan for this afternoon, and you are most welcome. With this, I wanted to thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much, and I wanted to hand over this to the floor to the Assistant Secretary General. For you, please, sir.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I must say, once you read the program, I'm honored to be the first speaker for this conversation. And I'm delighted to see Ambassador Carsten Stauer also joining us with his outstanding experience and insight on this issue. Colleagues, you have also seen there are two colleagues sitting from DASA. So we are not here to speak with different voices. but we're here to give you different perspectives on this issue. So my job is to really zoom out of the effectiveness conversation, which is critical, and present to you the bigger issues that we think people like you should focus on. And since OECD, DAC, IATI, GP, EDC, UN, we're all together, this is also a moment to trigger that thinking. So with that, I seek your indulgence to let me speak at a very meta level. And Sherry will, of course, cover all the other ends for me. Thank you, Sherry. Thanks to IATI, Nigeria, and all partners for bringing us together. As you all know, we meet at a moment when development cooperation is under real strain. Money is tighter, sovereign debt is heavier, shocks and crises seem to becoming the new norm. And expectations and needs are higher than ever. Just look at the SDG financing gap, not to mention the climate change challenges. So let's be direct. There is a stress test for the system. If cooperation cannot deliver now, under pressure, under constraint, then its relevance will be questioned. The Sevilla commitment gives us a clear sense of direction. But the real issue is how that direction can work in today's conditions. And conditions are changing radically every month. Let me highlight 3 shifts that we cannot ignore. First, the math no longer adds up. In 2025, aid fell by 24%. At the same time, developing countries paid $1.4 trillion in debt service. That is money not going to schools, hospitals, food security, or climate protection. There was hope that private finance would help fill the gap. But less than 2% reach the poorest countries, and almost none goes to basic services. In short, needs are rising, but reliable funding is not. Second, the system is getting harder to navigate. More actors, more funds, and initiatives, but with less resources and even lesser clarity. According to the DCF survey, conducted across 75 countries, only about 2/3 receive timely information from partners. Even fewer know what funding is coming next year. That makes planning difficult. And national coordination spaces are weakening, just when countries need them the most. So what do we see on the ground? Overlaps in some places, gaps in others, and a lot of guesswork in between. Fragmentation is not neutral. Coordination burdens, competing conditions, misaligned time horizons. These get absorbed by the governments least equipped to manage them. With all that is changing right now, are those costs rising faster, and are they showing up in new ways? Third, policy incoherence is getting more costly. And we have been talking about policy coherence since the monetary consensus days, but now the cost of incoherence is becoming very high. Debt, trade, climate, and security. These have always shaped the development landscape. But today, the pieces don't always line up. And sometimes that is not an accident. One policy supports growth, another pulls resources away. The evidence on where incoherence hurts most and for whom is exactly what the system needs to be honest about. Dear friends and colleagues, These are not small problems. They point to something deeper. The system was built for a simpler world. Fewer actors, clearer roles, more predictable flows. That is no longer the reality. Everyone is moving, but not necessarily in the same direction. And we witness on a daily basis practices moved faster than policy. What countries are actually doing has outpaced the global norms, policies, and measurement frameworks meant to guide it. And that we are witnessing at a very rapid pace in the last 12 months. How practice is changing in the areas of health, in food security. So the question we need to ask is not just, it's relevant, but not just that question, how to improve effectiveness. Question is important, but not just one question. It is more basic. That question is, do these ways of working still hold together under pressure, under stress, under strain? Or are we layering new demands onto an old structure that cannot carry them? This is where the development cooperation that the UN convenes matters. Not as another meeting, but as a place to bring the full picture into view. The Development Cooperation Forum brings together partners GPEDC, OECD, DAC, TOSD, and IATI. We all need to put our heads together. We are in it together, and we have to find solutions together. A place where diverse actors with different roles and experiences can look at the same evidence together and be honest about it, what it shows, and how do we deal with it. And let me end. The system does not lack ideas. It lacks shared clarity, shared vision. Sevilla gave us that, but we need to implement it. So let me leave you with this. We are not operating in stable conditions anymore. Complexity is not temporary. It is the new norm. The question is whether development cooperation can adapt to that reality, not in theory, but in how it actually works. Because if the system cannot hold together under strain, it will not deliver where it matters most. The Sevilla commitment points us in the right direction. But what matters now is whether we can make the system work as a system again, clearer, more connected, and focused on real outcomes. I don't have answers to these questions. I hope panelists will have them. But I wanted to flag those for you, and let's work together to find the way forward which works for everyone. Thank you again. I deeply regret I have to leave for another meeting. So I'm not running away from the conversation. I'll be listening in and learning from Sherry and, of course, Ambassador Stowe. Thank you again.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary General. It's a very honest, very provocative, at the same time, very, very reflective remark for this important forum. And hopefully we will take all those challenges that you put across for us in this.
One comment. At the UN, honest and provocative means I said something wrong.
No, you did not. Absolutely not. You have done a very good job. Thank you so much, sir. Have a wonderful day. We appreciate you. We will move on to the next in the line for us to share their reflections. It's now my pleasure to introduce our co-host, the government of Nigeria, to provide a country perspective. Henry, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and Excellencies, colleagues. I am honored to speak at this important dialogue on revitalizing development effectiveness. I would like to begin by noting that Nigeria warmly welcomes the renewed global commitment reflected in the Sevilla commitment, particularly its strong emphasis on country ownership, transparency, mutual accountability, and results. These principles speak directly to our journey in development cooperation, where better use of timely and comprehensive data is important, particularly for us in the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, where we lead coordination and also support the medium-term expenditure framework and provide the Parliament and citizens with clearer information on what external partners are financing in the country. So what is needed now is to move from principles to practice by scaling up such country-led data use across partner countries. From Nigeria's perspective, one of the most pressing challenges in development cooperation has been the fragmentation of information. This is so because we work with a wide range of bilateral, multilateral, and philanthropic partners whose support mostly takes the form of project-based aid and who have historically reported through different templates, timelines, and systems. So for a planning and budgeting ministry, this meant that significant effort went into reconciling multiple spreadsheets, ad hoc surveys, rather than analyzing trends and results. However, the upgrade of the Nigerian Development Corporation dashboard to automatically integrate IATI data has been a turning point in addressing these challenges. So now, Nigeria offers a concrete example that this approach can work. Today, we systematically integrate all IATI data into the Nigeria Development Corporation dashboard and map the system to track the SDGs, the National Development Plan pillars, and the medium-term expenditure framework sectors, as well as tracking subnational level interventions. The data contained in our system tells an important story about both resources and coordination. When we filter the data by project or program aid grants and disbursements, we see that cumulative disbursements from key partners amounted to over $7 billion over the period 2020 to 2025. Annual volumes rose from just over $1 billion in 2020 to around $1.4 billion in 2022, before easing to about $900 million in 2025, mirroring the broader global trend of tightening aid volumes and underscoring the need for better prioritization and coordination of limited resources. This integrated view has allowed us to shift the conversation with partners from inputs to alignment. For example, by mapping data in the dashboard to our National Development Plan pillars, we can see that a large share of disbursement over the period from 2020 to 2025 has been concentrated in human development sectors through partners such as Gavi, the Global Fund, USAID, UNICEF, and the Gates Foundation, with health alone receiving over $1.7 billion across these actors. At the same time, the data set helps us identify sectors where external finance is comparatively limited or highly fragmented, informing our dialogue with partners on pipeline development and rebalancing portfolios. Our experience generates 3 practical lessons on how interoperability and systematic integration of IATI data into country aid information management systems can drive improvements in development effectiveness and streamline reporting requirements. First, using IATI data as a common global standard and integrating it directly into our country systems reduces the need for separate donor-specific reporting exercises by enabling a single data set to serve multiple purposes, including national budgets, balance of payment statistics, development cooperation reports, and monitoring of the SDGs. Secondly, Mapping this data to our national classifications rather than leaving it in donor-specific categories has been essential for country ownership, enabling us to answer policy questions such as which regions and sectors are underserved by project-based official development assistance without requesting new information from our partners. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, interoperability has changed institutional behavior because the dashboard provides a near real-time view of external finance projects. It is now used routinely in joint government partner reviews, sector working groups, and parliamentary briefings. This has strengthened our ministry's convening rule. It also enables the central bank and the Ministry of Finance to use the same data for macro fiscal analysis and give the National Assembly a more solid basis for oversight, thereby translating transparency into accountability and better policy. Nigeria believes that these lessons have direct relevance for the global platforms gathered here today. We see IATI as a foundational data standard that can complement and enable rather than duplicate the work of the Development Cooperation Forum, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, the International Forum on Total Official Support for Sustainable Development, and the OECD DAC Committee. If these mechanisms increasingly draw on IATI-based country-validated data feeds for their monitoring frameworks, peer reviews, and knowledge products, they can reduce the proliferation of parallel data calls while making the analysis more timely and more grounded in what partner country systems capture. From a partner country perspective, our recommendation is therefore very clear. First, global initiatives should jointly endorse and promote the systematic integration of IATI data into national aid information management systems and related country platforms, building on experiences such as the Nigerian Development Cooperation Dashboard and similar systems in other countries. Secondly, global monitoring exercises under the Sevilla Platform for Action, including those linked to the Development Cooperation Forum and the 2020 Pact for Effective Development Cooperation, should, wherever possible, source their quantitative indicators from these integrated data systems rather than from standalone surveys, thereby directly incentivizing stronger country systems and reducing reporting burdens. Nigeria stands ready to contribute to this agenda in a practical way. We are open to working with interested partners on a pilot that tests how IATI integrated country systems can fully replace at least one major survey-based reporting exercise while still meeting the information needs of global platforms and provider countries. We are also willing to share our technical methodology, governance arrangements, and lessons learned from the Nigerian Development Cooperation Dashboard so that other countries can adapt and improve on this model in line with their own capacities and priorities. In conclusion, our core message is that revitalizing development effectiveness must start from country practice. When global standards such as IATI are interoperable with national systems, when partner countries are supported to use this data systematically, and when global platforms rely on them for monitoring and policy dialogue, we move from fragmentation to coherence and from rhetoric to measurable improvements in how development cooperation is planned and delivered. Nigeria remains committed to this path and to working with all partners to ensure that the Sevilla commitment translates into concrete gains in transparency, coordination, mutual accountability at the country level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. It was a powerful and practical reflection from a partner country, showcasing how we can practically collaborate and reduce inefficiency optimize on effectiveness of development cooperation. Even if we haven't answered yet the question 100%, at least he gave us a tip and a clue where we could actually improve. So thank you very much, Henry, for such a reflection. It reminds us that development effectiveness is not an abstract concept. It's about how the systems work on the ground and whether countries have the tools, the data they need to lead, because we all emphasize and believe in country leadership. With that in mind, we would like to move on to the panel discussion. We have very many distinguished speakers today in the table, and I would like to now hand it over to Her Excellency Grace Louise Wood, Acting Ambassador to the Economic and Social Council at the UK Mission to the United Nations, to moderate the panel, introduce the panel, and moderate the discussion. Grace, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yemi, and thank you to you and our other hosts for the opportunity to moderate this discussion. So I think today's event is a really timely opportunity to explore how interoperability between data standards improves development effectiveness, which is particularly important in the context of more constrained resources, as we've heard. For the UK's part, we are committed to the principles of effective development finance and to the implementation of the Sevilla commitment. This includes transparency, which the UK championed during the FFD4 process. And we now need to focus on how we turn that commitment into practical action and improvements. The UK was one of the founding members and the first, I think, to publish to IATI. And we've always understood the importance of transparency and accessible and usable data. That is why we are also going to chair IATI for the next 2 years. We're very proud to take on that role. To us, data needs to be complete, easily accessible, usable by decision makers, and interoperable with partner country systems. And without this, I think we risk failing to ensure development effectiveness. We believe in the notion of publish once, use many times, so that we can reduce some of the reporting burden on the publishing organizations, so we can avoid duplication, and so we can also strengthen underlying data that's vital for decision making. And we are delighted that IATI, alongside TOSDI and the UN, are leading the Sevilla Programme for Action on bridging data systems for financing for development. And through this, I think we hope to see some progress on what we are talking about around interoperability, collaboration rather than competition between data systems, and also ensuring development finance data is more transparent, comparable, and of course timely for all stakeholders. Without good data, we really cannot plan, coordinate, or ensure accountability. So that is what we're here to discuss today with our panel. My aim is for us to have a really practical and concise and focused discussion so we can start to talk about how we move from the Sevilla commitment towards delivering more concrete actions. So I'll begin with a couple of rounds of questions for our panelists before opening up to the floor here. So get your questions ready as we go through, and really encourage the speakers to be focused and brief. So with that, let me introduce our panelists. We have Shari Spiegel, the Director of Financing for Sustainable Development at UN DESA. We have Ms. Annika Otterstedt, the Assistant Director General from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency and one of the co-chairs of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. To my right, we have Mr. Carsten Starr, the chair of the OECD Development Assistance Committee. And we have the Julia Ben as well, the head of the Secretariat for the International Forum on Total Official Support for Sustainable Development, TOSDI. And of course, you've already met our kind of host, Yemi from IATI. So to kick us off, given the breadth of the development effectiveness agenda, I think I want to start by identifying some of the key gaps and priorities that most need strengthening. So my first question is going to come to you, Shari, and then on to you, Annika, so you can prepare a bit. So this is around the Development Cooperation Forum and the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. Both play a role in monitoring development effectiveness. And so from your perspectives, which aspects of the effectiveness agenda do you think we need to strengthen over the coming year before we get to FFD Forum 2027? What would you prioritize? So if I can come to you first, Shari.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for having us here. And, it is really, as Naveed said, to look around the TOSD, GPDC, IATI, and of course the DAC, the Sevilla commitment, it called for a revitalized development cooperation forum, bringing together all of these different entities. And so I'm very happy to be here as part of this discussion to start this off. The Development Cooperation Forum, of course, it's not just focused on development effectiveness. It's broader than that, thinking about development cooperation more broadly and bringing together different communities and different perspectives on the issues. So I thought I would start with the development effectiveness vision in Sevilla, which, as was said, was to elevate country ownership and leadership by developing countries, as well as policy coherence by development partners as core principles of effective development cooperation, with a strong focus on results, inclusive partnerships, transparency, and mutual accountability. It also re-emphasized the existing GPDC principles and added policy coherence to them. Second, these are distilled into actions to turn these principles into action. And I sort of pulled out 8 things: responding to country plans and strategies, committing to multi-year cooperation agreements for stable and predictable funding, strengthening existing national systems rather than establishing parallel ones, ensuring all interventions incorporate elements of knowledge sharing, capacity building, and resilience building, striving to adopt a whole-of-government approach, and untying aid, and promoting national procurement and audit systems, and actions to reduce fragmentation, which include prioritizing core contributions to multilateral institutions and pooled funds, utilizing the respective strengths of MDB as horizontal providers and vertical platforms, really understanding when is it best to work with someone who has a balance sheet and can leverage versus funds that don't have that, and streamlining and harmonizing procedural and policy requirements. So there's a whole host of things that are in Sevilla, and the DCF is going to be thinking about, how do we follow up on all of this? And when we talk about development effectiveness post-Sevilla, really focusing on these 8 things. So the next place that we were thinking then is, how are we already doing? And the 2026 FSDR shows a Financing for Sustainable Development report, which all the colleagues here also contribute to, something we work on together, shows a very mixed picture. So responding to country platforms, maybe to start with that 42% in the DCF survey, 42% of responding countries reported receiving only partially complete information from development partners or none at all, and 30% reported that development partners sometimes or never provide timely information. Yeah, right. Thank you. That's a very good, that's the place that so there's some gaps here. When we're responding to country plans also based on SDG 17.5.1, which is a proxy for countries, for use of country systems, really based on GPDC data, development partners use country-owned results, frameworks, and planning tools in fewer than 2 out of 3 interventions, and it's basically back to the same level of 2018. So in terms of the second area, in terms of forward-looking predictability of development cooperation, it also remains limited. So again, the Financing for Development report using IATI data shows that only 15% of development partners publish budget information for 3 years into the future. Third, progress on untying aid is mixed. Overall, over 80% of bilateral aid is untied, but almost half of the value of untied contracts funded by DAC members are awarded to suppliers from their own countries. And frankly, the big focus we're having on Blended finance may even increase this and make it worse. So I think blended finance has a lot of potential, but we need to make sure it doesn't end up leading to an increase in tight aid. So the share of bilateral ODA to core contributions in multilateral organizations and pool funds, as we all know, has declined in 2024 from 27% to 25%. So I think that there is scope to improve on all aspects of development effectiveness, from alignment with country priorities and systems to fragmentation to policy coherence. So what should we keep in now between now and 2027, when we actually have the DCF in March and then the 2027 FFD Forum in April? It's really, how do we keep momentum on the development effectiveness agenda and address some of these issues. It's not straightforward in the current political context, because in many ways the core effectiveness principles of country ownership and policy coherence are in many ways polar opposites to the narratives that we're all discussing now of self-interest narrative that many traditional donors have embraced, where how do we balance this with country ownership, I think, is one of the challenges we have to think about. On the other hand, we also know that there's enormous growing interest. There are numerous initiatives, as we all know, on thinking about the purpose of development cooperation going forward. So I think that there's a lot of excitement on this question, and the question is, how do we make sure that we can move it forward in a positive way? So I'll just end with one last thing, thinking about some of the areas that we've been thinking about from our side. Obviously, first is country ownership. How do you make country ownership real? What concrete steps can we do to move that forward? The second is, we're in that essence, we're also thinking of how do we strengthen and rethink the DCF survey to make it fit for purpose in the post-Sevilla context. We're also focusing a lot on impact. On impact, it's a red thread across the FFD agenda, but how should it be defined and measured? And really thinking of bringing together, there are so many different groups that are looking at measuring and thinking about impact from very different perspectives. The MDBs are doing it, some other PDBs are doing it, bilateral donors are doing it, and the private sector is frankly doing it, and at least the impact investors in very different worlds. Can we bring those together to think through what does impact mean and how do we measure it? Allocation questions are also really important across countries, but also across actors, as I mentioned, MDBs versus vertical funds, and also across modalities such as blended finance, budget support, et cetera. So just to give you some of the places that we're thinking of, I probably spoke for too long, so apologies.
Thank you so much, Shari. Really helpful. If I can turn to you now, Annika, to build on some of those comments. Thanks.
Thank you. There are so many things to say, but I'll try to stick to my mandate as one of the co-chairs of GPDC. So thank you for inviting me to this important event. I really support the objective to bring several initiatives together. And I think many of us supporting all the initiatives, so they can only improve our dialogues and coordination. GPDC has a lot to offer all stakeholders, of course. As you know, the GPDC supports countries to track and implement the 4 effectiveness principles: country ownership, focus on results, inclusive partnerships and transparency, and mutual accountability. The GPDC monitoring is part of how we can track and deliver on the FFD4 commitments. The current 4th round, 23 to 26, is ongoing, and the 44 participating countries have all reached the results phase. Based on these, there are now ongoing multi-stakeholder dialogues at country level, which will feed into decision-making, hopefully, I should say, and reform processes to enhance the effectiveness of partnerships. This action phase is a new and more ambitious feature of the monitoring compared to previous rounds. We are now also preparing for the rollout of a 5th round to commence in 2027, which will feed data into the follow-up of both FFD4 and the Agenda 2030. So welcome with good initiatives and suggestions on how to do this in a very much improved way. In terms of the question of what needs strengthening, we will have better data to respond to this by the end of the year, when we will launch the Global Monitoring Report. The report will highlight progress and global trends in development effectiveness based on data from the 44 participating partner countries, 93 development partners, and many other development stakeholders. The report will be launched as a global online high-level dialogue first week of October. And then you might wonder, why is it online? Why is it not here in New York? And that is, of course, because it's more effective, cost-effective, and it will allow many more people to take part in an equal way in the dialogue and understand the results and have a good joint discussion. So I think it's a smart way of doing it. I would like to highlight a new feature of this fourth round, which is the Kampala Principles Assessment. This assessment will provide answers to how partnerships with the private sector can be improved and how the effectiveness principles are applied. So my response is stay tuned for the final results. However, if I'm to highlight one aspect which will be important to address, it is the need to build trust and strengthen mutual accountability between stakeholders. Finally, let me just mention the 2030 Pact on Effective Development Cooperation, which Sweden is a co-lead of. The pact is a space for evidence-based dialogues on key tensions, trade-offs, and solutions to strengthen the impact of development cooperation. We have held 2 online dialogue meetings so far, one with a deep dive into South-South cooperation and another on localization. The pact currently has 29 members. I invite all of you to take part in the dialogues. We look forward to working with all colleagues and platforms mentioned in the Sevilla Commitment chapter on development effectiveness, including IATI, DCF, TOSTE, and the OECD-DAC, to enhance synergies, find possible ways to streamline and to ensure that the GPDC's contribution add to our joint efforts to revitalizing the development effectiveness agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you both. I think that gives us a really good sense of where some of the main gaps are and priorities and opportunities and things coming up to look out for. Now, I want to turn to you, Carsten. The Sevilla Commitment highlighted the current OECD DAC review. And so I think I would love to hear a bit more about sort of as that moves forward, what areas from the OECD point of view you think need to improve within development cooperation to better support the effectiveness agenda? Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to this panel. I'm pleased to be in good company, not only by the chair and the chair, but also by DCF, GPDC, TOSTE, IATI, a lot of people that are involved, heavily involved in this effectiveness agenda. So, but before turning to your question, maybe basically on delivering development cooperation in a manner that ensures maximum impact in partner countries, I'd like to say a few words on the current situation, primarily the steep decline in ODA, which we announced a few weeks ago. Combining the final 2024 figures with the announced 2025 figures and the projected 2026 figures, we are most likely, at this point in time, looking at losing a third of ODA resources over 3 years from the peak level of 2023 to where we will start in 2027. So 2024, 2025, 2026, a third of ODA is expected to disappear. This is dramatic, and while we should definitely increase our efforts to work more effectively and to deliver better and with more impact, and also mobilizing more, the cool fact is that because of these drastic cuts, people will suffer. The poorest and most vulnerable will suffer the most. I forget about more for less. Less means less, and less ODA means less impact. And as we're all aware, the dramatic drop in ODA happens at a situation where the needs are further increasing, where the gap between needs and levels of concessional finance is thus widening, further aggravated by the current energy, fertilizer, food crisis emanating from the Middle East. Last year, already aware that winter is coming, the DAC agreed to review and improve its role, its tools and partnership approaches. And the overarching aim of that DAC review is to make the DAC, its products, where you're producing data analysis standards, more relevant, especially to partner countries, but also other providers and stakeholders. Now, we have limited the DAC review to issues within the purview of DAC decision making. As development effectiveness is an issue to be addressed in a broader context together with other stakeholders, including GPC and others, this extremely important issue is not formally part of the DAC review. But at the same time, the DAC review process consists of several work streams which are bordering on these effectiveness issues. So, data, the subject of work stream 1, partly work stream 2 of the DAC review, is an absolutely key resource in working more effectively. And throughout the long history of the DAC, the principles of transparency, accountability, evidence has been the hallmark of the committee. The review now looks at how data can become further predictable, more forward-looking, an issue mentioned by Navid also in his introductory remarks, and on how we can strengthen cooperation with other data providers, increase interoperability across different data systems, as we promised in Sevilla. So we are trying to double down on the quality and the connection of data, and we look very much forward to working with all other providers in this field. Furthermore, we are mindful that there is work to be done to make access to OECD data easier and better. The review will also look at situating ODA within the wider totality of development finance flows. Here, the aim is to provide a better overview from a partner country perspective, also addressing some of the points that was made by Nigeria, and help identify how ODA can become more catalytic in different aspects of catalytic functions. In essence, what we'd like to do in the DAC is to strengthen and increase our cooperation and collaboration with other data providers and move towards engaging in partnerships that are aimed at better supporting country-led systems. The last element of the review I'd like to mention is a strong commitment to become more open and more inclusive, to consult, to invite partners into our discussions, including in the WP-STAT, the Statistical Working Party of the DAC, where I know there is work ongoing to link IATI and CRS data to enhance transparency, coherence, and usability. So, even though effectiveness is not a formal part of the DAC review, we really see a lot of potential in collaborating with other work streams on this, and we see a lot of co-benefits from the review into the wider effectiveness agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carsten, for that. And I think we very much look forward to seeing the outcomes of the review sometime soon. You mentioned collaboration, and so now I want to touch on the role of development finance data and how TOSTI and IATI have both been aiming to complement OECD DAC data by expanding publication and use of this around development cooperation. So I'll turn to you in a minute, Julia, around where you see the gaps in how sort of newer and more emerging forms of development finance are being captured, and also how we can address some of these gaps. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel. So maybe first, so about TOSTI, as you know, it was created to track the totality of support given for sustainable development of developing countries, and the work of the International Forum on TOSTI, which has existed since January 2024 as an independent entity hosted by the OECD. Our work is really about strengthening the T on TOSTI, so the totality of flows, and always focusing, however, on the recipient perspective, clearly distinguishing what countries receive. So we call it cross-border flows to developing countries, from other expenditures which are rather, contributions to global public goods or, addressing global challenges. And in our view, this two-pillar design, it's actually very useful because it clarifies the scope of development support and it enables easier identification also of the financing gaps. So now getting to the data gaps. So more and more countries and organizations are reporting to TOSTI, and we are making progress in several areas. So for example, we have been looking into the special drawing rights as a specific instrument that can bring financing for sustainable development to developing countries. We've looked at biodiversity finance. We are also looking at various modalities such as South-South and triangular cooperation. Nonetheless, some major providers, we all know this, do not report yet. And also we are in a situation where information is still kind of sitting in different places. So to achieve the aim of capturing the totality of flows, I think we really need to join forces and take it as our starting point. What we are doing in the International Forum on TOSTI to fill data gaps, so I would say 5 main actions. So the first one I'd like to mention is that we follow the UN agreed methodology to measure South-South cooperation to collect data on this framework of collaboration. And we believe that this is really key to broadening the data on South-South cooperation and doing so in ways that countries feel empowered and comfortable about reporting their activities. Secondly, we are conducting pilots. So, for example, we are working with the UNHCR on spending by developing countries to support refugees and asylum seekers. Super interesting exercise addressing the issue of, the issue of refugees. A lot of that burden is actually being taken by developing countries themselves. We are undertaking data quality reviews. So this year we are planning to do a special exercise on triangular cooperation. We know that there are some data gaps there, so that's another way of doing it. We involve developing countries in the data validation process. So this is the TOSTI recipient data review mechanism that you might have heard about. And then finally, actively and explicitly promoting interoperability with other data systems, and we've done it during the FFD4 process. Presently, we are working under the SPA, Bridging Data Systems for Financing for Development, and we are delighted to lead this with IATI and the UNCB Secretariat. Now, about the FFD follow-up process, I'm not sure whether I should cover it now, or it's kind of a second round of discussion.
I think probably now.
Yeah. Sorry, now it's better. Yeah. Yes, okay, very good. So first, I would like to say that we are really honored to be included in the Compromiso de Sevilla as one of the platforms and bodies supporting the revitalization of the Development Cooperation Forum. We feel that the FFD for follow-up processes, including the DCF, is really the right space to have conversations with all countries and about common challenges and solutions. And these are the spaces that serve to create trust between stakeholders and in the development architecture overall, and they enable also system-wide approaches. So, and you mentioned trust, I also mentioned trust. Trust is really fundamental to broadening data and evidence about the totality of support. The FFD4 follow-up can also help by backing the practical work on interoperability, which I would like to kind of define it. It's enabling systems and platforms like IATI and TOSTI, or TOSTI and the CRS system of the OECD to talk to each other. It doesn't mean creating one single system. But interoperability, it reduces duplication, it reduces reporting burdens, and especially for developing countries. And the FFD process, we think it can accelerate the results on interoperability by encouraging countries and multilaterals to join pilots and encouraging also the governance structures of various systems to advance on interoperability, because there's also a political dimension to interoperability. It's not only about, IT systems. Also the FFD4 process can encourage, what we would call butterfly effect investments in this work. My final note would be to say that in the International Forum on TOSDI, we would really be happy to present TOSDI data, evidence, research done in our forum at the DCF and overall in the FFD4 follow-up process. We see this as a key discussion. It will allow TOSDI data to better respond to countries' needs. And this is our, what we say in our presentation usually, if they are rotten tomatoes, so we are happy to receive them because that then helps us to improve the TOSDI standard. So thank you for the opportunity to present this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julia. And can I now go to you, Yemi, to talk a bit about some of the challenges that still can limit countries' access to the data that they need to drive sustainable development?
Thank you, Grace. I will focus on one very major challenge, which Henry somehow touched upon. The countries are still lacking access to data, particularly up-to-date data. And the Assistant Secretary General, in his remark, and Sherry, in her reflection, also touched upon it. Really, the numbers are stark. And she mentioned them, and I wanted to repeat them because they are very important. If we leave this room, I want you to remember them thoroughly. 42% of the countries report they receive incomplete or no data, despite the effort that we've been doing for a decade and a half. And then from donor and development partners, 30% report that data is not timely. So the point is clear, data still is lacking. We need to work to reinforce this. And most importantly, using IATI data, and as reported by Shari here, 15% of finance providers publish only forward-looking data. In the day where the Assistant Secretary General has emphasized how rapidly the situation is evolving and development finance is declining in a manner that without even knowing which sector is going to suffer, how to reallocate their national budgets, countries are struggling. The struggle is real. Without any timely, predictable data, obviously, governments cannot plan effectively. And Henry was very clear in his testimony from that. And they cannot align resources with national priorities. This is going to be a dream for them because they wouldn't be able to do so. And they cannot coordinate across partners because the delivery chain has become longer and aid has become smaller and smaller. Projects has become far too many. And coordinating it has become a nightmare for them. So really, we've been told by our member countries, partner countries, we have 75 members in IATI. We have a very inclusive governance system. 22 of them are partner countries, like Nigeria. They spoke to us very clear, please make up-to-date, forward-looking data available. And I wanted to thank our publishers. We have 2,000 publishers who have been publishing regularly to IATI for a decade and a half. You have done very well. Let's do better, and even more importantly, update our data more regularly so that countries can actually plan now and be able to cope with the situation and adapt to the changing circumstances. So that is a very important thing, and IATI's value addition is enormous. I would like to say this to you all. It is offering a real-time data, no matter how small it may be, and it may look. It took us almost a decade and a half to get where we are now. So we are the only data system in the entire architecture of development cooperation where real-time data, forward-looking data, machine-readable data with 500,000 documents that can be read by AI is available, directly ingestible to country systems. So we must recognize IATI for what it does and what it does very well. For that, I wanted to thank the Digital Alliance, International Digital Alliance, for recognizing IATI as the digital public good in 2025. So having said that, let me come back to this particular point. 19 countries are using IATI data, as I said before. If we enhance its timeliness, if we enhance the forward-looking element of this, they could do much, much better. And I'm really, truly grateful for the mentioning the OECD CRS team and the QSSD team present here. And we also had a very good conversations with JPDC team, how we can best collaborate to be able to serve the countries better. So for us, I think IATI plays a very significant but equally important role, and we focus on providing the strategic backbone for the development data. We wanted to provide our dynamic infrastructure that provides the most up-to-date data to the entire system for the countries, as well as the global architecture, to use it, to build upon it. And our data standard that allows comparability is a greatest asset that the international community has created. So let's make it more used and usable. And I also would like to say that all others can build upon it so that that becomes the backbone for the entire system. And I think that's our best strength, and we recognize others like TOSSD, JPDC, for their global role in accountability, country-level systems. And I wanted to say that we are working very hard in our SPA that Julia has mentioned to make data interoperable. And we are truly looking forward for that to become a reality this year, not later, so that you can see the fruits of this effort that we are putting in. With this, I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Yemi. And I think it's really great to hear all of the work that is already underway, some of the solutions that are being explored, and definitely a lot of areas of current and future collaboration. I'm conscious of the time running a little bit short, so I wanted to take this moment to open the floor, and then I might come back to the panelists for some sort of quick fire after that. So if there's any questions or comments from the floor, now's your time to ask. Great, I see a couple of hands. I saw your hand first. I can't see your name. If you could introduce yourself and then ask your comment, and then I'll come round there.
Yes, hello. My name is Peter Sevlon. I represent a program called Effort Efficient SDG Fulfillment in Regions of Transition. And I have one question in respect of the various data systems, whether they are open source or are you using closed source, because the compatibility aspects in this.
Thank you. I'll take a few and then we'll come back to the panel to respond. Take a question there.
To the panelists, a really fascinating conversation, and data is so important to all of the work that we do. Zachary Bronstein, Climate Connectors. I would be very curious to hear a little bit more about conversations around use of AI, the challenges and opportunities, both from a data capturing perspective, but also from an interoperability perspective. Thank you very much.
I'll come to you here.
This is Vibeke Nielsen from NORAD, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. I'm very glad to see how the different actors are coming together around this. And it's been great to see the leadership that the IATI is putting in this, and very happy to share that Norway is also now joining IATI. Looking forward to the continued collaboration, also engaging actively with GPDC in discussions. I wanted to pick up on something that I think also is very relevant in development effectiveness, and that is how we fund data systems to inform progress. I think this is focusing on the data and development support, but we also have the need to strengthen the national data systems. There is another SPA that Colombia, Norway, and the UK are co-leading, where we're focusing on this. And I just wanted to highlight that I think it's important that we, from a donor perspective, also think about how we more effectively can support national systems to inform our needs, but also to inform, of course, how we support the systems and how we think about increasing effectiveness by supporting the national systems, so that they also can inform their own governments, because I think there is still a big gap in how countries actually are able to use their own information, and how we can create a good national system where you reduce silos across agencies, where there is data sharing happening, and so on. So this was more of a comment, but thank you for the engagement and the collaboration.
Thank you. I see a few more hands, so I'll take a couple more. I saw a hand over here. Yes. And then I'll come here.
Yeah, Bodo Elmers from Global Policy from Europe. Because we see this return of Tide 8 recently, it would be actually quite interesting to have more precise data on contract awards. I mean, we have this data on Tide 8, and Shari already mentioned that basically 50% of the contracts still go back to donor countries, but even on a more macro level, I mean, governments always present this at the moment to the citizens as if it would be in a national interest to tie aid because it supports the economy. And in fact, it's probably a very small number of companies in these countries who benefited from it, while basically the whole population pays for the aid budget. So basically, I mean, there's reason to assume that you enrich 1% on cost of the 99%, so to speak. I say that because last week we had an interesting debate in the European Parliament where somebody noticed that actually the whole European citizens from all of Europe pay the European budget, but the firms from Europe who are active in developing countries, who are active in delivering aid projects, are probably a few firms from Western European countries. So basically you have quite an imbalance there. So it would be interesting to see, because we need to counter this argument that it's in the national interest to tie aid. Thanks.
To the panel on those, and we might have time for another round. So firstly, we had a question on open data. Secondly, on use of AI. Third, on how we fund national data systems, and just then on data around contract awards linked to Tide Aid. So who wants to start? Yemi.
Very much. I'll touch up on a few of them. Thank you for asking that particular question on open source. I wanted to confirm that IATI is open source. And I also wanted to say this, because this is a very important point that you're raising. When we speak to our publishers, who publish 2,000 of them to IATI, we tell them, you might be publishing in your own website, but by publishing to IATI standard in an open data source, you will make your data visible, comparable with others who are also in the same space. And I wanted to recognize in the room today, we have, together with NORAD, who, as a Norway government, who also confirmed they wanted to join IATI, and they have been working with us. I wanted to recognize the Saudi Fund for Development, whom we have been working the last 1 year together as an observer to publish their data, because our partners have been really asking for emerging donors' data. They wanted to see where they are investing, how they are investing, how complementary it is. The only way that can be possible is when they are publishing to an open source and the global IATI standard. So I wanted to thank Saudi government for their commitment to transparency and willing to continue to publish for IATI standard. Second point on AI. Let me come back to the particular point. I wanted to thank UK FCDO for exploring the use of AI using a Development Explorer, they call it, and it is an AI-powered tool. And they were generating incredible insights because, as I mentioned earlier on, we had 500,000 documents in IATI seated, not being used. It's a golden mine, and they are exploring it. It's bringing out incredible insights that are very useful for coordination, partnership, and decision-making. And I wanted to thank them for pioneering that. Having said that, obviously, it has a number of challenges. One of them being, obviously, as much as AI is good, it also still requires human touch because it generates as much as what it can from the system that it's accessing, but it requires still human touch. Second, whatever we're publishing, it is important that links are broken, things like that. The documents that have been uploaded were security guarded, and then they couldn't be accessed by the AI. So there is a whole lot of work that needs to be done for the AI to continue to be used to generate insights. Contract awards and tying of it, if you don't mind me commenting on that, because it's a very important point that the colleague has made. OECD and IATI has partnered to do an analytics on Germany and Australia data to see if aid is untied or tied still. For all the timers like me who's been in the system for a very long time, starting from MDGs, aid still is tied and is being very much being delivered by few contractors. And in both country contexts, we've noted that. And we've done another study by an Australian research institute. 10 billion transactions reported in IATI were analyzed. Incredibly, we've seen from beginning to the end in the delivery chain, in the intermediaries. Who are the active partners doing what? In which country? It was fascinating. 17,000 organizations were mentioned in IATI data. More than happy to share those documents with you, but it is a real issue, and IATI could actually showcase that because we are a network data. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think Annika wants to come in, and then Julia.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on two of the questions. One is on open data, and I think what is important outside these organizations working on data gathering and, of course, distribution is also everything that is done at the bilateral level between countries and the state-to-state cooperation, where many of us have statistics ministries or authorities in our countries working directly with the other countries, the recipient countries' governments. It's not always the case that the partner countries or our countries, by the way, are interested in distributing the data. So we are from, now I'm speaking as a CEDA colleague, we are working very hard on using AI more to ensure that everything we do in partner countries or with any development funding is totally transparent, and we have a system called OpenAid where everything is displayed, everything. So I think that is a good start, but I have also noticed that in some countries there is not that much of an interest in distributing all data, and it can also be very sensitive to some people, so you have to be a little bit careful. I think that talking about data gathering in many countries, we have seen many examples also of the SDG tools that have been developed in countries where it has been, the data gathering has been totally dependent on the country's own initiative and interest, and with the point of view from the country's perspective. So I think we do both, but we need also to make sure that information is provided to investors in all parts of the world, because otherwise neither banks or the private sector will invest in our part of the world or in other countries, because they need transparency. They also need to know that the financial systems are transparent, working, and non-corrupt. Thank you.
Thank you. And then just a minute perhaps from Julia.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. So about the open data question, TOSTI data, their activity level publicly available. We have a data validation tool, but I think we are kind of still developing the possibility of, for example, researchers being able to download easily the entire TOSTI database. So that's an area that we need to work on. Now, I wanted to comment also on the issue of AI, because AI can help a lot in finding out what is in this wealth of documents that are being produced on development cooperation, development finance by various countries and agencies. It can be also used for data capturing, but like Yemi said, I would very much agree that we need to be a little bit careful about that, and there needs to be somebody checking on what are the results that the AI is then producing. Because if you just leave it to the AI, so things will go wrong. And unfortunately, in the business of data analysis or statistics, once you start publishing results that are totally wrong, you very quickly lose your credibility, and then you need to start from the scratch. What we have found in our work with the countries who report, not everybody feels comfortable of using AI for reporting purposes. So in our work with the Secretariat, we are using AI to do some of the kind of time-consuming checking activity, but then there's another level of checking that goes upon it. So a bit careful, but it's a very good tool, and I think it will help us with this interoperability issue. by defining ways how we can do the mappings between different systems, etc. So it's certainly something that we need to pursue, but it's not like the miracle that is going to resolve all our issues today.
Thanks, Julia. I think Carsten wanted to come in, and Shari, I might give you the last word, and then I think we'll then move to closing.
I think I'm not a data expert, very far from that. But it's clear that we are by definition believing in openness and to provide as much openness to data as possible. I fully subscribe to what Annika was saying. Open aid, whenever you have public resources involved, there has to be transparency and accountability on that. And we believe in that. There can be issues of where partners can insist on not providing openness to data, but if we can minimize that as much as possible, definitely in favor of that. On AI, it's very clear, and also Julia points here to the reputational risks that this is to institutions. And we see that this, if we combine that with a media landscape that has less and less curated media and less public interest media, it's a really dangerous cocktail. So an organization like OECD is fairly reluctant, maybe too much, to rely on AI because the risk of things coming out of hand and providing things and can actually create really big damage to your reputation. But it also means that we may be slow in some aspects, but I think it's worthwhile. On the Tide 8 issue, the trend is there. We just, in January, reconfirmed the recommendation from 2001 on Tide 8 in the OECD DAC. All committee members agreed to those changes and reaffirmed the 2001 recommendation. And I think that is, I think, for me, a very positive feature that stands, and that it has the active support of all 34 members. But it's clearly something that we need to keep an eye on, because there are trends in the world that are running in this direction, and which will have a negative impact on the effective use of funds, which is, of course, our responsibility to taxpayers also. So I'm not in any way trying to talk down that issue as something that we need to look into. But I think we would need to have a more informed discussion on some of these trends within the DAC and with outside partners, and have the evidence on this that it's possible to generate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Shari, if you can just keep it to kind of a word or two, and I'm afraid the others that have questions, you're going to have to find our panelists outside at the Vienna Cafe for chase them, don't stalk them, but find them and ask your questions out there. Shari.
Thanks. So no, I'm also not a data expert, but I do just to say that, and obviously data is critical both for country planning as well as for having these bigger conversations. And so we in the DCF, we are bringing all sources, both to the reporting and to the so we really welcome all of you to come to the DCF to have these conversations and to remember that the data is there to also have the bigger conversations. It's not the end, it's the first step. And so we need to then build on what data we have to have the conversations on the development effectiveness and the future of development cooperation.
Thank you, Shari. Thank you, Shari. Short and sweet. I'll give back to you now, Yemi, to start closing us out.
Thank you so much, Grace, for doing a fantastic job in moderating this panel and still making time to hear from many of you who've been patiently present here, contributing to this very important conversation. Thank you once again, Grace. And I wanted to thank every one of you as well in the room for such a dynamic and very dynamic conversation and discussion. I would like to extend a special thanks to her again, once again. To bring this session to close, I also wanted to now call upon our distinguished speaker, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Mrs. Ella Warmenger, Deputy Head of Department of International Development at the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. Allow me to say one more important thing. France has been a very important partner, a member for a very long time in IATI, and a credible publisher to IATI standard. Madam, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your invitation. First, I wish to thank Nigeria and IATI for hosting this high-level side event. I also extend my gratitude to all the panelists for your contribution today and for your insightful contributions. The 2026 Financing for Sustainable Development report, released just days ago, reaffirms a stark reality. The SDGs financing gap has increased to $4 trillion, whilst ODA had just fallen below $200 billion. Even if all DAC countries met the 0.7% target, we would still fall short of this figure, and it will be a long way from it. This is why it is worth considering alternative perspectives, sometimes moving beyond the concept of cohesionality and donor efforts, and adopted the viewpoint of the beneficiaries. We support your efforts to improve data systems that go beyond ODA, enabling partner countries to track the full spectrum of development finance across official, non-official, and private flows contributing to development. In this context, TOSD does a very, very great job and does measure the totality of public investment directed towards partner countries, taking into account our overall efforts towards the SDGs. In a concrete way, TOSD does contribute to a broader understanding of development finance, and its inclusive governance is also a major asset in that regard. IT, in turn, provide a globally endorsed standard and technical landscape to provide us real-time data, both ODA and non-ODA data, available to be into the country systems. So together, they support a more complete understanding on development finance, improving its availability, strengthening insights, and supporting more effective cooperation in practice. France particularly welcomes the progress shared by our colleague from Nigeria. Their ability to integrate in real-time data from IATI directly into national budget systems demonstrates to everyone the power of country ownership in practice. When data empowers national planners to align international cooperation with their own priority and frameworks, we achieve together a higher level of effectiveness. In this context, it has been particularly valuable to situate today's discussion within the broader efforts to promote the development effectiveness agenda. The Sevilla commitment does provide a renewed political momentum, and it's very good to hear from representatives of the Development Cooperation Forum and of the representative of the GPDC. All these platforms play a critical role in turning data into action by promoting dialogue, by promoting coordination, by promoting partnerships between partner countries and development partners, and by ensuring that data is used to inform decision-making and accountability. The issue of metrics also is at the core of the new approach of international partnerships that we want to promote during our G7 presidency, building on the Sevilla commitment. We remain strongly committed to ODA, which we continue to regard as a benchmark of assessing the financial contribution of traditional donors to development. But we believe that we need a broader view of all financial flows contributing to development. That is why we need data, we need to work to access to data, we need to better use data to move towards more effective, data-driven, mutually beneficial partnerships that put country ownerships at its core. Transparency is also central to this effort, and France is very proud to be a long-standing member of IATI and an active participant to TOSD. The review of the OECD DAC is really important in this context. We want to show how important an ambitious reform is necessary. We believe it will be beneficial to present and to communicate ODA data in a more integrated and strategic manner, alongside other data on private investments in partner countries, as well as non-concessional public financing. We actually already have access to most of the necessary information in various databases, TOSD, of course, IATI, or data managed by other organizations, such as the World Bank. But we think that by adopting this integrating approach to place the partner country's perspective at the center, we could also enrich the information available to them for their own development strategies and consequently increase the effectiveness of our work. This data, aggregated together, could even form the basis of new metrics in the future. And to conclude, some words about the fact that France welcomes the Bridges Data Systems initiative under the Sevilla Platform for Action, which offers a concrete and practical way forward by linking existing systems across IATI, TOSD, the OECD, and the UN. It can help deliver the more integrated view of development finance that we are calling for. This is directly relevant to ongoing OECD DAC review and to ensure that data better reflects the full reality of financing for development in partner countries. I will let you know on this ID, and I thank you very much for the invitation and for your attention today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ella, really for those insightful closing reflections. She truly emphasized publish once, use often, reduce reporting burdens. She emphasized integrate, interoperate more and more, and she encouraged us to work together. Truly appreciate those reflections. And please allow me to say one or two words and we'll close this session. I cannot thank enough all of you for the great patience you've shown, the contributions you have made, and for the insightful comments you've made. Thank you very much. Let's keep talking. Let's keep conversing. The panels, the speakers, distinguished members here present in the table, thank you very much for your contributions. I would like you to stay a little bit behind for the group photo, and I wanted to thank everybody else for having a wonderful time with us. Thank you.